is settled now. Okay, so today I wanted to introduce the theories, and very often I go very fast because I expect students to have read on the theories and to ensure that we don't have to spend too much time on them because they're quite a lot. I mean, they are not they're not things that you can learn once. You need to read around them, even if we discuss them in class, because they will reoccur in um, most of the classes that you are going to be undertaking. So it's important that you take this seriously. Okay. Just give me a minute to find my points here. Um, Adembe, which class are you supposed to be in?
It should be DBA 102.
No. I asked the physical class where people are supposed to be.
Oh, sorry about that. Exam hall 2, Chiromo.
Yeah, but exam hall 2 does not have it doesn't have Wi-Fi, does it?
No, it doesn't have.
Are there students who are there who are working from there? Is there any student who's working from there who can tell us whether there is Wi-Fi there? Where are you yourself, Adembe?
Personally, I'm at home. We had communicated this information to them in good time to prepare them for today's class.
Yeah, but also students, I think, who have challenges with Wi-Fi,
yes,
they need to. One of the reasons why the physical classes I mean, some of the students were asking for physical classes was because of Wi-Fi. So we need to know whether students have challenges so we can find another class so that those students who want to come to class can then come to class and and so we need to know that. I need to know that from students, whether students there are those students who want to be on campus because of Wi-Fi. Are there students in this class who have that challenge? I'm talking to you, students. Are there students who have challenges with the gadgets? Like, for example, there are some people who don't have computers. No? So I assume that, it is okay. So as I said last time, I repeat for those of you who are not there, this issue of COVID restrictions and not restrictions, but COVID regulations is really about ourselves. So I think I had said that I don't know, Adembe, you need you need to make sure that you take the list so that students who are not on the list can put their names on the list so I can do the groups. Yeah. And what I'll do is that we'll take not this Wednesday, but the coming Wednesday. The coming Wednesday, we will not the next Wednesday. Next Wednesday is what date?
Next Wednesday is on 2nd.
Is on 2nd. So the next Wednesday is around 9th, yeah? Of March.
Yes, 9th.
Yeah, so yes. the Wednesday of 9th, you would have taken round the list, and people would have filled the list. So on the 9th, we shall have a physical class. Okay? So on the 9th, we shall have a physical class where we will just finalize on the groups. And the reason we shall have a physical class is that we'll make sure it is a short class, because especially if the room is not fumigated and, all sorts of other things have been happening there. So we will have a physical class and just make sure that we keep distance and do all those things so that we can finalize with the groups and so that the group members can know each other. Yeah, that's very important for the team members to know each other. So after this class, you remind me, I email you the soft copy of the Excel that I have. Let students who are not on the list fill their names there with their details. And then now on the 9th, we shall have a physical class. So we shall have like maybe about 45 minutes of class, and then we shall have about 20 minutes of dealing with the group work. So please remind me so that you remind me that week, the week of the 9th, so that I know that it is a physical class. So we arrange for everybody to be there. It is enough time for everyone to arrange to be there. Okay. And then we can also, at least sort out the issues that people have. Okay. So today, as I've said, I want to deal with the evolution of management theory. You can see the PowerPoints.
Yes.
Okay. So usually with this class, I usually start with what are the explanations about management, but this time I'm starting the other way around with the evolution. And the reason I'm starting with the evolution is because quite a number of students, I think, tend to think that evolution is just a bunch of theories. That's why I usually start the other way around, whereby we discuss the fundamentals of management before we start to talk about the origins of it. But today we are going to really talk about the origins of management, simply put, really. And throughout history, there's been, only about 125 years ago, that business ideas and practices were very different from today's, accepted like management ideas. So management wasn't even a field of study maybe 200 years ago. It was not because we were not really having large organizations. And the reason it's about 125 years ago is really when we started to have large organizations. Really large organization is when the study of management as a science, and as a job or as a management as a career started to arise. So the today's discussion really presents the origins of management ideas and practice throughout history, and how that study has affected or influenced today's changes in management and production, and how we view managers. So this is just a kind of like a down memory lane, figure 1.1. And Adembe, please note that figure 1.1 so that you'll note the figures that I point out, so that I can send to the students after we finish the two classes, so that when students are studying, they can look at it and reflect, especially in groups. Yeah. So this is just the management ideas and practice throughout history. Like if you look at 5000 BC, BC means before Christ, is when you had Sumerians starting with the record keeping. Some of the interesting highlights is that and then within the 4000 and 2000 BC, you had Egyptians planning, organizing, and controlling written requests. This is when you start to see the building of the pyramids. And then, of course, those of you who did history, especially the history of Africa, you know that in the 1800s, we had the Hammurabis, where you were talking about control and written documentation and preservation. This is the time we were starting the preservation of documents. And then 600 BC, the Nebuchadnezzar wage incentives, production controls, which are famous, and so on and so forth. And of course, we come to 1525, where you have the Machiavelli cohesiveness, power, and leadership. So they go down. Those of you who did serious literature, you can remember the Sir Thomas More, 1500, critical thinking of poor management and history. So that these are historical facts that we have learned through history in different settings, that then culminate together to put the management ideas and practice throughout history. So in a nutshell, management as a field is quite an old field, and also it's an interesting field in my view, especially the theoretical, the evolution of the theories. Why do we then need managers today compared to then? Please, if you are at home, you should ensure that you are muted, especially if you are around children, because it's your responsibility to do that so that you don't disturb the class. Okay, so why do we need managers today? Obviously, from that history, you know that we need managers, but today we need managers because, we used to work within families, or one would argue that actually now that we are in COVID, we are going back to working within families. But what that means is that we had serious, like there was no difference between family and work, because people used to live in the institutions where they were working, because the institutions belonged to them, belonged to the family. So that's what they mean there, but working families. And also, these institutions were being passed down from one person to the other. So these days we need managers, because we are not passing institutions from one family member to another. We need to get to, there is a higher rate of competition, and therefore, because of competition, people have to hire a workforce that is competent to run institutions. So we are working in the offices and in factories, and therefore we need managers. Then you didn't really need, you didn't really need to train people. People learned on the job, so they became skilled laborers on the job. These days, you need specialized and unskilled laborers so that you can have a mix of both and then train them. That needs an organized way of doing it, and therefore we need managers. Then we had small self-organized groups. Now we have large farms and large factories. Then we had unique small patches of production. But now we have large standardized mass production. So there is more need for managers now than then. So we then look at the history of the classical, evolution theories. Here you have the classical evolution theories, which are part of, sorry, yeah, that's classical. Oops. So you have the classical theories, which include, of course, the discussions on scientific management and administrative management, which is the largest group of those, and we shall look at that. And then you have the history of behavioral theories again. This is sometimes called, sometimes called neoclassicals. In some books, you'll find that they will say neoclassical here. For those of you who are readers. I don't know why this thing is jumping. The internet is very unstable because of the rains. Oops. Okay, so we have neo here. Neoclassical, which is behavioral theories. And sometimes they are divided into behavioral and human relations. But they are really the behavioral theories. Although most of the books will not really mention neoclassical, but every time someone tells you or talks to you, or you read a book where it says neoclassical, what they're referring to is really the behavioral theories, which then have surpassed the human relations, and they go into behavior of organizations and they have given birth to organizational behavior. Okay, so that was just a footnote to ensure that you understand. And then we'll look at some of the quantitative theories, which in most books they might not read quantitative, but they will read operations. But in modern books, they should read quantitative theories. And then from the quantitative theories, we'll discuss the systems theories, and then we'll discuss about the contemporary theories. And I'm going to use this figure here to just discuss that in a nutshell, so that we don't take too much time. So you can see from this figure here, and this figure is already on the e-class, in the notes on the e-class. So you have the historical background, and in the historical background, you have the early examples of management. You have Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nation. If you remember the book on the Wealth of Nation, you have the Industrial Revolution. You have the classical approaches, which includes scientific management and general administrative management, and includes the bureaucratic management of Max Weber. And then you have the quantitative approaches, which include operations management and management science. And in some books, they would, especially the simpler books, they'll talk about research, operations, and management science. Okay. So as I said, in some books, you'll find that they'll just not talk about operations. They'll say quantitative approaches include operations research, management science, and operations in general. And then, because we are talking about using simulation. This is the beginning of computer simulation and computer programs that then resolve management problems in terms of how you manage casualty, for example, in the First and Second World War, and so on. And then we have the behavioral approaches, which I explained that after the quantitative approaches, in some books you'll find that they refer to the behavioral, the entire behavioral, evolution theories as neoclassicals, because they deal with a lot of early advocates deal with a lot of studies, the Hawthorne studies. They deal with the human relations, and they also deal with organizational behavior as a new field in a new field of management in behavioral approach. And then we have the contemporary approaches, which involves the systems approach and the contingency approach. So and remember that the evolution theories are discussed in the way they appear. So, for example, you cannot start discussing the contingency theory before you have discussed the historical and early approaches to management. So the early approaches to management include ancient China and art of warfare. And this includes the Great Wall of China. Yeah, those of you who have been to China understand a lot of Kenyans go to China these days. I was seeing how almost a quarter of our GDP on purchases are being done in China. There are quite a number of Chinese products on our market. And then you have ancient Egypt and building of pyramids as an early example of of management. The pyramids are quite something to behold, especially if you have to look at them physically. I don't think pictures give a good account for that. Then you have the Roman Empire and the building of roads and viaducts in the Roman Empire. And those of you again who did proper history, and you should know how the Roman Empire conquered the whole of Europe. And then of course you have the Industrial Revolution and modern day management. And in the Industrial Revolution, that's when we were introducing the division of labor and introducing the machines to replace human beings. And as I said, management is a very old concept, dates back to the ancient times. And in China, of course, leaders express need for open communication and specialized labor, merit-based promotions and job descriptions. And of course, this led to building of a great monument like the Great Wall of China. In ancient Egypt also, pyramids and other monuments took a lot of planning, organizing and management of labor. And remember, during this period of building the pyramids, which is like in the 1600s, 1400s, I think, there was a lot of, that's when slave trade also started. And you can imagine that if around the world, all these projects, big mega projects were going on, and therefore there was a demand for labor. And so it was one of the reasons why slave trade thrived. And modern management service during the Industrial Revolution, of course, with the creation of incentives, whereby an effective way to motivate people was found. And a more detailed discussion, of course, of this is located in the textbooks. But the problem is when you now create a need for high performance and high production, that's when the Industrial Revolution started. And because of that, people had to think outside the mainstream and look for solutions in Industrial Revolution, where you are dividing, where you are calling for specialization and division of labor. So after the early approaches to management, which of course I've not mentioned all of them. For example, I've not mentioned the Catholic Church as an example of early, in fact, one of the latest example of early approach to management with their structure. The structure in the Catholic Church is still the same, and of course it has changed quite a bit, but it is still a very big example of institutions can manage big institutions around the world. And then things like the Taj Mahal and the quite a number of those monuments around the world that appear in the Guinness Book of Records are part of the early management. Then we have, of course, after the early management, and I'll keep going to and fro, so you have to bear with me, yeah? I keep coming back to this figure so that we are all together. So we have talked about, and then of course, I did not talk about the Adam Smith book, which was written in the Wealth of Nations, which was written in 1776. Yeah, so that also contributed to the early examples of management in history. So now we have the classical approaches, and in the classical approaches you have the first studies of management, often called the classical approach, which emphasize rationality. It's very important for us to understand that it emphasizes rationality. It emphasizes rationality and making of organizations and workers as efficient as possible. Two major approaches came out of this, which comprised of that classical approach, and these were the scientific management and the administrative management. So in the classical approach, you have those two major approaches. The scientific management and general administrative management contributed to the evolution. You remember that we are building on from the historical aspects. So the scientists and managers and owners of businesses were trying to find out how can we move from the Industrial Revolution, for example. And the contributors to scientific management theory were Frederick W. Taylor and the husband and wife team of Frank and Lillian Gilbreth. And Frank and Lillian Gilbreth, for those of you who did science, were the ones who invented the pendulum. So they did experiments on time and motion, and this time and motion helped in building the rationale behind the Frederick Taylor's scientific management theory. So the proponents or the contributors of scientific management theory, or the father of scientific management theory as is known, is Frederick Taylor, and he was helped by Frank and Lillian Gilbreth. Then the two most important contributors to general administrative theory, which of course, and we shall go into the details of it. I just want to give an overview here. So the two most important contributors to general administrative theory were then Henry Fayol and Max Weber, and of course Henry Fayol and Max Weber were kind of trying to get away from the scientific management theory of the four sets of principles of scientific management. They felt that the four principles as advanced by Frederick Taylor were too narrow, and also they were concentrating so much on how to make a human being work like a machine, rather than just give guidelines to the rules. So before, of course, the scientific management came about, organizational decision making could best be described as as rules of thumb. The rules of thumb, or seats of the pants, as they call them, are decisions were made haphazardly with no standard procedures. They were passed down from one generation to another. That's what rule of thumb means. They had no systematic study or collection of information. So in contrast, now the scientific management thoroughly studied and tested the different work methods to identify the best one way of completing a job. So scientific management was basically to study and test the method to identify the best most efficient way of doing a job. And so no standardization of procedures and no follow-up on improvement, but just make sure that you have a one way of doing a job. So to do that, Frederick Taylor said that you must then have 4 principles that you must then take into consideration. This is the dates. The dates are very important also. This is the dates when Frederick Taylor lived. So he was born in 1856 and died in 1915. But he had 4 principles of how you will develop the one best way, of doing a job. And please remember that he's called the father of scientific management because he actually spent 3 years to improve output of workers who are deliberately restricting output. And his principles are described as follows. You develop a science for each element of a man's work, which replaces, of course, the old rule of thumb method, which you pass, like what I know, I pass to my children and my children pass to the other. The second principle is that scientifically select and then train, teach, and develop the workers, And then the third one was, so remember, the reason why we are saying scientifically select and then train is because they use the rule of thumb where people learned on the job. And so he was saying that you have to scientifically select people and ensure you are getting the best people, those people who can learn, and also the people who have the potential to grow in the job. Cooperate with the men to ensure that what he means there is that you cooperate with management to ensure that all work is done in accordance with the principles of science. So in other words, that there should be cooperation between the workers and the owners of the companies. Because remember that those days, for example, Frederick Taylor himself owned the business that he was really struggling to manage. He owned the business, so he was owner manager. And so there was that distance. And so what he was trying to say that we should be professional and reduce that distance so that managers are talking to employees in other levels. There's almost an equal division of the work and the responsibility between management and workers. So in other words, that between management and the other levels of management, there will be equal division. So everybody should do what they are good at, as opposed to one person who is the owner manager supervising the other. So these 4 principles then ensured that you can only have one way of doing a job by following these 4 principles. After Frederick Taylor, of course, along with Frank and Lillian Gilbreth, they were researchers and they often use their own family as guinea pigs for the research. And of course, as I said, their work is written down in this Cheaper by the Dozen and written by their son and daughter, of course, because they probably died before they could write. But as I said, they were also involved in the time and motion studies, which were to simplify work, and of course, they made some very significant contributions to the employment of handicapped workers and the field of industrial psychology. As I said, the Frank and motion studies, where you have timing, how long it takes good workers to complete each part of their job. And then the motion studies is breaking each task into separate motions and then eliminating those that are necessary or repetitive, just creating efficiency and simplifying work. the motion studies are popular in physics and other sciences. And then you had, of course, Henry Gantt. I hope all of you have a Gantt chart of your study and all that. Henry Gantt also came in to create a chart which we use today in scheduling either your plan for your study for the 4 years that you're going to be at university, or if you work in operations, you work on, like in manufacturing, that we use a lot of this to schedule. We also use this to schedule even in the scheduling of timetabling and things like that. So Henry Gantt, in addition to creating the Gantt chart, made significant contributions to management with the pay for performance. In other words, that you pay people for what they have performed, and training and development of workers. So he really came up with this orderly way of doing things in order to support the scientific methods of Frederick Taylor. Then came along the administrative studies, and within the administrative studies, as we have said, we had two major contributors. We had Henry Fayol, and then we had Max Weber. And of course, when we hear of the term bureaucracy, we obviously think of inefficiency and red tape, incompetence and ineffectiveness. But this is not what it means. Max Weber was a German sociologist, and he did sociology after his struggling. He was originally a scientist, and then he did sociology because he was looking for solutions in his large company that he had been left by his great-grandfather. And I think he had come back from the US or someplace where he had gone, I think, when there was the Depression. And he came back and he really had to bring back this company. So he was a German sociologist, and he proposed the idea. He did actually sociology and psychology up to PhD level. And he proposed the idea of, of bureaucracy organizations. In other words, let's have an organized organization where reporting relationships are very clear. People would lead by virtue of rational legal authority, and then also from the knowledge and expertise, and not from the fact that you are a family member and something has been handed down to you. So he was really proposing an exercise of control on the basis of knowledge, expertise, or experience, instead of the original, where you went to the job because your parents owned the company. So the aim of Max Weber's bureaucracy has seven principles. First, that qualification-based hiring, that people should be hired based on qualifications. People should also be promoted based on merit. Yeah. And then there should be a clear chain of command in the organization. Who reports to who, when they report to that person, what it is they report to that person on, and so on and so forth. And division of labor. So it's very clear what you do, what you do as manager A, and what I do as manager B should be clear, clearly defined. And remember, we are trying to resolve the issue of rule of thumb and family. So like a family who comes a family member who now inherits the business and is controlling the business and does not know about the business. So he was kind of saying that should stop. Yeah, so you should it should be very clear what a manager does and what a level A manager does, a level B and level C, and so on. There should be impartiality in application of rules and procedures. So the rules and procedures should not be personalized. They should be applied because they work rather than, being applied on the person. And they should be applied because it is an organizational procedure rather than on the person who is in the job. And then recorded in writing. In other words, the rules and procedures should be put into a standard operating procedure. They should be recorded, and so that everybody can, if you have a problem, you can go back and refer. Managers should separate from owners. So there should be a difference between, if you have become a CEO or a manager, there should be a difference between what you do and what an owner does. So he had 4 principles, seven of those. In fact, in the 7th one, he also said they should, in number 2, when you say merit-based promotion, he also meant that you should have career, a career transition in the organization, so that someone can grow from being, for example, a messenger to a manager. And then you have administrative management, also pioneered by Henry Fayol. And Henry Fayol is actually seen as the father of administrative management theory, because he came up with these 14 principles,